Question: do you want to feel valued, seen, heard, and loved on your wedding day? It's a no-brainer, isn't it? So with that in mind, what if I asked you whether you also want your guests to feel valued, seen, heard, and loved at your wedding? You want that too, right? If your answer is no, then I think we're done here. But if your answer is yes, but how, you're in precisely the right place. Jordan Kentris is a Canadian maximalist designer of 15 plus years and founder of A Good Day, who specialise in one-of-a-kind stationery and event branding. From his years in advertising, communication and design, and his own experience as a member of the LGBT plus community, Jordan has a unique point of view about what inclusivity in weddings really means in practice. Hint, it goes back to the valued, seen, heard and loved question I just asked you before. Today, Jordan is going to teach you 8 easy ways to make your wedding more inclusive, including how the words and phrases you use in your wedding stationery design affects how your guests feel, a few common blind spots that couples often have in their planning that makes their wedding not very welcoming or comfortable for all their guests, and how to roll out inclusive and gender-neutral language in your day of activities and design pieces. Let's get stuck into it. Unbridely is a community of pro-wedding vendors who believe in freedom and integrity in weddings, giving you options, solutions, tips and tricks to create the experience and memories that you and your fiancé really want and deserve. Because we believe that weddings are a team sport. With how-tos, stories and interviews with recently married couples, we find out what went right and what they'd change if they could go back and do it all over again. I'm Camille and welcome to the Unbridely podcast. Hi Jordan, and thanks so much for joining me on the Unbridely podcast.
Thanks so much for having me. I'm super pumped.
Yeah, it's a bloody pleasure. Let's go right from the very top. Tell us a bit about where you've come from and what you do.
I am a stationery designer, a brand designer, but I also come from the world of advertising. So on the advertising side, I make websites. And so over the years, I've learned quite a bit about how people shop and buy and consume content. So I'm a user experience designer and my specialty is research and strategy. So I learn a lot about like why people buy a car and when they buy a car and how they buy a car.
That's fascinating.
It's super cool. I love it. But of like taking that and applying that way of thinking is how I design events, thinking about how a guest experiences everything end to end, what happens when they get their invitation to all the way through to when they get to the event and when they leave, like working with couples and planners to like think about all the things. In my experience, a stationer is engaged to, I need to save the date. I need an invitation. I need a menu. I need a place card. And I'm like, well, what about signage? What about this? What's happening with your website? What's your gifting like? I like to ask a lot of questions and, just put ideas in people's heads because I want people to think about what's happening at all those stages. I love that part of it. And then I am kind of like a pop culture junkie. So I like to bring a lot of that into my design aesthetic and approach. And I tend to gravitate towards couples who like those kind of things as well, because we share a common language. One of my couples from a couple years ago, we still talk on Instagram, but they're really big RuPaul's Drag Race fans. And I am too. And so we literally talk every season, just being like, what's going on if anything? And so it's just fun because we're not talking about work or anything that we've done together, but we build relationships with people, which is one thing that I love about working in events.
I think just listening to you there, what I'm picking up is you're exploring past the actual wedding itself rather than checking boxes
Absolutely.
About, you need this, you need this, you need this. You're going, who are you? What do you like? You're exploring a little bit deeper.
Consultations with me are typically a little bit different than I find out, again, other people do, because I want to know what your event is going to look like, but that doesn't mean much to me other than some basic framework to work from. I want to know where you shop, what brands you love, what kind of TV you like, what's your favorite pizza topping. Like, I like to know those things because I'm like, how do we incorporate those elements? Like, I do a lot of custom monograms for my clients, and oftentimes, we can't include our pets in the day physically. So I'm like, how do I include your pet in the wedding without it being like a literal illustration of your dog or cat. I find little meaningful cues that can be woven through an event design that have a really big meaning to the family and the couple themselves. But, to the guests, they're just like, that's pretty, but you're like, this is super meaningful to me. And so that's the stuff that I love to bring in there because, again, it's those details and the layers that make it all the more personal.
Absolutely. And because weddings have evolved so much further than just two people getting legally married, it's a real expression of not only the couple, but a point in time, their families, their interests. That's super cool. Okay, so keeping that in mind, of course, people's identity, what exactly does inclusivity mean in relation to weddings?
It's a really interesting challenge, I feel, because gender has been so ingrained in communication for weddings, bride and groom, Mr., Mrs., like especially when you go back into the very traditional formal style of so-and-so and so-and-so are invited to like on the exterior of an invitation. And so for me, inclusivity is about honoring the family and couples way of identifying and how they want to be presented and all their pieces, but also doing that for the guests. So it's about extending it and seeing them and honoring them in the way that they choose to be addressed, choose to be presenting at the event. But for me, it's all about honoring everyone's wishes and hopes and goals for the event. And so that to me is the true meaning of inclusivity.
I really love that. Can I ask, because I'm actually not across it, where is marriage equality in Canada?
Oh, we are golden. I think gay marriage has been legal for, I think it was like 2000, early 2000s, I want to say. So yeah, we're awesome.
Australia was late to the party. We rocked up in December of 2017. But as a celebrant, one of the requirements, like legal requirements of the ceremony, is I had to state what the legal meaning of marriage was in every single ceremony. And, up until 2017, I had to say the legal definition of marriage in Australia is the union of a man and a woman. And that was one of the biggest points of friction for me in my job, because while that might be true and the couple actually getting married, they're like, right, yes, it is, that's awesome. But just like you were saying then, what about everyone else? What about everyone else who's attending? How does that make them feel?
You're like basically invalidating legally. You're like, by the way, you're not a legal thing. And you're like, and as you who are an advocate for those things, it's probably just like, I don't really want to say it this way, but it has to be said this way because legally this is what needs to be said in order to check the box that this is now a legal thing, which is just kind of like shitty feeling.
It was really shitty. So yeah, we don't have that bullshit anymore, which is awesome. Woohoo! Moving on from there, apart from not making people feel shitty, why is inclusivity in weddings important, do you think, Jordan?
It's something everyone should be able to celebrate in a way that is meaningful to them. And when they feel excluded, you feel othered. You're kind of like, well, why isn't this? Why am I being singled out? Because it is, you're literally being like everyone else but this specific way is right. And so I think inclusivity is incredibly important, just so that, everyone feels like they're on an even playing field. Like it's just, I feel valued, I feel seen, I feel heard, and I also feel loved. And, I'm going to be able to be celebrated and part of this. When you're just like, everyone who's not straight isn't included, you're like, okay, what does that mean?
Do we have to sit at a separate table? What's going on?
Am I at the other kids' table?
Yeah, it is kind of bizarre, but there are lots of different ways, aren't there, that, that aren't as obvious as me reading out the legal definition of marriage during a ceremony that make people feel uncomfortable at weddings, like unseen things.
It's really interesting. It can go down to like the littlest things, but like having a male and female washroom and identifying it that way is a huge thing.
Wow. Do you know what? I hadn't even got my head around that. Yeah.
I know this because my family has a lot of friends who identify as trans, or they identify themselves as they, them. And so for them, being put in a box is uncomfortable. My husband's gender fluid, and he's like, I don't feel comfortable using a public men's washroom because I don't identify as hyper masculine. It's just like, once you're being forced into a box and you're like, I don't really know what I'm stepping into. And when you kind of neutralize that, that gives everyone a space to just feel comfortable.
That's just blown my mind. I hadn't considered.
For folks who don't identify, especially folks who have like gender dysmorphia or are just like, I'm presenting as female and I might have a deep voice. So they're like, no, you're a man. And I'm like, no, I'm over there, but I'm now uncomfortable because I don't feel safe in either bathroom.
Yes, of course. Of course. Goodness, I hadn't even looked at it. Thank you. Thank you for sharing that, Jordan. So what other sort of cliches and customs should engaged couples be looking out for? What are some of the common things that are often overlooked?
Often when you're addressing your guests, typically we default to Mr., Miss, Mrs., Ms. One of the easiest things is ask them how they want to be addressed. It could be no honorific before that, or mix, MX, which is the gender neutral version of it. So for me, it's important when you're getting your guests to give you their address. How do they want to be identified? How do they want to be addressed? And then if you're going to go the traditional route, you can kind of go that way, or just drop the honorifics completely if you're untraditional and you don't worry about those things. And so that is like an easy way. So then when the envelopes come, you're not going to be triggering anyone with like, I'm not identified as Mr., but now I'm Mr. Thank you. And same thing on the day of. So place cards, any of those things. That stuff is like, for me, some of the easiest things you can do. I've done some events where we've done identification labels, where guests might be want to be he, him, they, them, she, her, where we've had couples where they know there's going to be quite a few people and they want to just feel comfortable. It's not everyone has to do it, but it's just a nice little touch. It's not to break the bank, but you're making sure that everyone feels comfortable and has the ability to express themselves the way they want. When it comes to, it's the same thing with like for me, asking their pronouns and how they want to be identified is like asking them for dietary restrictions or what's your favorite song you want to hear. So you just kind of like, it just should become common knowledge. You see it a lot more, I guess, now that we're in the world of Zoom and Microsoft Teams meetings and all that stuff, you're seeing people identify their pronouns oftentimes a lot more. And so it's just continuing that language. I'm a really big fan of on the invitation, if you have an audience who needs to feel like they're going to be acknowledged, just letting it know that it's going to be a gender inclusive event. Sometimes that can go a long way, especially if they're worried about it being like a super traditional family and they're like, am I going to feel comfortable in there? We've gone to a couple weddings where my husband looks like legit fabulous and he's wearing the most beautiful like dress. But then he like gets there and he's like, I don't really feel super comfortable, but it's my family. And so I'm like, we're going to be okay. Like, it's going to be fine. But he doesn't know what to expect going into it. And so just that little bit can just kind of be like, well, I'm going to shave off that little bit of tension before I get into a situation that I didn't even realize I was going to get into.
So when you say to let your guests know that it's going to be a gender inclusive event, how would you let your guests know?
I would specify it that way. You could also say, all guests are welcome. Like you can just find ways of saying it in fun ways. You can do the very basic thing of including a little pride flag on your website. Like you can acknowledge people in ways that they would recognize without hammering it over the head. Or you could just say, an LGBTQ plus friendly event for those, again, who are potentially a little bit more traditional, who want to make sure that their guests feel like it's not going to be a super stuffy affair that they're not going to feel comfortable at.
Because I find that's quite frequently the case, Jordan, that there might be a progressive couple getting married, but their parents and perhaps grandparents are not across what it means to make everyone feel welcome. Some couples going, okay, we're doing the wedding website, for example, or we're about to address our invitations and we want everyone to know, like we don't want to raise just a little pride flag and go, hey guys, you're welcome, the 2 or 3, people who may be affected by this. We want everyone to know in no uncertain terms. And so, I find it might be at this point in time, 2023, here in Australia, definitely. But you were, just saying before that Canada, you're miles ahead.
I mean, it exists everywhere. There's people who are not comfortable with it. And so for me, when a couple wants to put a stake in the ground, put a stake in the ground and don't be afraid to do it because it's your event. I mean, your family might be helping pay. Like I get it. And there's the pressures of it, but my opinion is you should have the people you want at your event and everyone else can suck it. I don't mean in a negative way, but like, honestly, there's so much pressure that comes with it and there's so many tensions, but it is your event and it is your party and it is your celebration. And if you want those folks there, you need to let them know that they're going to be safe and that they're going to be welcome. And anyone who is not going to do that shouldn't come.
I agree.
That's my opinion on that. It's a little controversial, but I'm like, it's fine.
No, we love it. We love it. You still haven't written your vows yet, have you? Let me help. In around 20 minutes or so, you can easily write personalised wedding vows unlike anything you've heard before that will make your fiancé feel like the most loved, understood and appreciated person on the planet. The How to Write Wedding Vows That Don't Suck instant download 17-page PDF ebook walks you through a step-by-step format for your vows, how to find the right words and phrases to describe your feelings and your fiancé, how to write that crucial first draft, and create your final wedding vows masterpiece. So if you don't know how or even where to start, if you've been Googling your little heart out, or if you've been calling them wedding vows, AEIOU, this ebook is for you. Included in there are also some bonus secrets for getting the most out of your wedding ceremony. So make sure you download your copy right now and get Write Your Wedding Vows crossed off your to-do list today. The link is in the show notes. Any other points that are commonly overlooked?
When you're identifying your bridal party, it doesn't have to be a groomsman or a bridesmaid. It could just be wedding party. Like, those are things that you can include in your program, your wedding website. Like, they're just things you need to think about. I'm imagining as an officiant, or a celebrant, there's language coming up now about marrier. It's not necessarily bride and groom. At least here, I'm seeing it a little bit more frequently, where you're not identifying anyone. You're just being like, you're getting married and congrats, you're getting married.
Yeah, two people.
You can do those things where you're just dropping labels from a lot of things and you're just identifying people as
parents of the engaged couple, even for me in ceremonies. Yeah, wedding party is a big one. Or I do crew.
It's just about having fun with it. And the thing is, for me, there's a way of honoring tradition, but also making it meaningful to you and your party and all those things. And so not being afraid to adjust things that make sense for you. Because I think a lot of people are like, well, I should do it this way and I should do it that way because that's the way it's supposed to be done. I've seen it done in movies that way, so I should do it. And I'm like, how do you want to do it? What feels right for you? What feels right for the group of people who are celebrating with you? So just do that.
Just do that. There's your message, everyone.
My husband and I eloped, which is like the antithesis of being in the wedding industry. But I was like, you know what? We were planning a wedding and we were sitting down. I'm Greek and my family's gigantic. And first cousins on both sides alone, we were over 100 people, with cousins and babies and all those things. And my husband was like, we're going to have a 300-person wedding. And I was like, I don't really want a 300-person wedding. So we're like, we're just going to save that money. We're going to go get married on the side of a mountain, just my husband and I. And then 2 years later, we had bought a house and we renovated it and had a party in our backyard and had 60 of our closest friends and family over. So we were like, you know what? It's a housewarming/wedding. And it was meaningful to us. And that's what we wanted. And so I always encourage my couples, if you want a big wedding, have a big wedding. If you don't want to have a big wedding, don't have a big wedding. I'm just a big fan now of well, what do you want? How do I get you to get what you need out of this? And how do we make, concessions? Because it is important to hear everyone's needs. But how do you find that right balance?
It's really good that you say that, Jordan, actually, because I think it's easy to say, it's your wedding, it's your fucking day, screw everyone else.
Yeah, screw it. It's not really going to work because you're just going to ostracize your family.
Yeah, exactly.
Or friends or whomever.
I keep thinking, you don't live in a vacuum. You're still going to have to confront these friends and family that you've severely pissed off.
I know. It comes at a certain point, though. I'm like, do I really want my bigoted uncle at this event? Not really. I don't really care if he's not going to be there because we don't have a good relationship. So that's okay. But if my mom's like, hey, could you invite so-and-so? I'm like, sure. I'm like, that's fine. I can make that sacrifice because it's for you. Like there's that conversation and that balance, not like everyone has to be invited because like, that's not really how that works.
Yeah. And I love the idea as well, you might not have a good relationship now, but what do you want for your future? When you're married, do you want a relationship with that person? Do you envisage that, they're going to be part of your lives and everything? I think that colours your decisions as well.
Absolutely. Like it factors into it because if you're like, I know I'm not going to have a relationship with them, we're not really going to talk. Like,
what does it fucking matter?
Yeah. Just not send them an invite. Got lost in the mail.
Sorry. So we talked about a few things that are usually overlooked. Can you give us some more examples?
So that's kind of where I started touching on the washroom side. So on the day of, there's a lot of things like wayfinding is something a lot of people don't always think about. And that's, making your way around the physical space of an event. And so it would be, just relabeling the washrooms, just washroom. Like you can just do something as simple as that, put a sign up. But then there's also things like when you're identifying the family dances, you can change the language. So it's, not a father of the bride dance. You can find ways of identifying it that modify the language that makes sense for everyone who's there. But I mean, if you want to have it, have it. Like that's the other thing is like, we don't have to bend over backwards to try and accommodate everyone because of political correctness. But we also have to make sure that we're not offending anyone intentionally. Like just finding that right balance.
You're presuming, Jordan, that the people that you're inviting to your wedding you actually love.
Of course. And you want them to be there. Like they're there to celebrate with you. The cool thing that I love about this is like you're inviting them into a very intimate, special thing that not everyone's supposed to go to. Like I'm not having a 10,000 person wedding of all the people I've ever met in my life. I'm not royalty. And so for me, I'm just like, I'm actively inviting you to this. So I want you to be celebrated alongside with me. And so how do we avoid, stepping on toes or triggering someone based on those things? I think it's always just nice to think about stripping back language and just identifying people as people, which I think is some of the biggest ways you can kind of go about those things. When it comes to the overall event design, you can go as easy as like in your bachelorette and bachelor party, like it doesn't have to be pink and blue. Like you can find ways of finding a neutral color or whatever color you love, like whatever is meaningful to you. I think that is a really important thing that some people have a lot of like connotations with and assumptions. And color has a lot of perceived gender bias.
You were talking about the father-daughter dance, the mother-son dance, which needn't be that. It could just be honouring parents. Can we ask for the parents of our happy couple to come forward and share, one of the very first dances with them to honour their relationship? But then I was also thinking, Jordan, talk to me about the bouquet toss to all the single ladies. Do you hate Beyonce?
I love Beyonce, but I'm like, I will join a bouquet toss even though I'm married in.
Just for the sport.
Oh God, yeah. I'm like, sure, I like the flowers are pretty. I'm like, they spent a shitload of money. Like the thing is working in weddings. Oftentimes we know how much things are being from an investment perspective. And you're like, this is some good shit. Like, I'm going to take this up.
You're like, $300 bouquet? I'm in there.
I'm in. It's like, those flowers are rare. They are imports.
Yes, absolutely. I love where your priorities lie, Jordan. That's great. But does it not make you pause when they say, can all the single women?
Of course. I'm like, well, why does that matter? Just single people, if you're going to do it that way. Like, who cares? Anyone want to come up and catch a bouquet of flowers? Do we even need to do that, though? That's the other thing is like, does the tradition even need to exist? How can you do something that's fun like that might be a little bit different? Like maybe you do a conga line dancing or like something where if you want to give the flowers away, give them away, but have it so that everyone can participate in giving them away.
Yeah.
It doesn't have to be a toss because then it becomes a free-for-all and it's a madhouse.
I also think, like Jordan, I mean, it doesn't have to mean, who you identify as or your sexuality or what your gender is, but even asking for all the single people.
Yeah.
It's like, why are we pointing out these poor single people?
It's
very strange.
like, okay, so you're single, so you're going to get married next. Like, here you go. We're going to pass it down because that's what we're supposed to do. Everyone's supposed to get married and have 2.5 kids and, just keep the cycle of life going. I'm like,
exactly. In 2023, it's a very strange delineation to go, if you're not partnered up, come here and we'll give you blessings for getting married soon. What about, okay, talk to me about your feelings when a bride is sitting on a chair and the garter, is up on her leg and the husband's got his head under the dress.
To me, it is a crass tradition. It's just kind of an icky feeling in general. Like, even I'm like, it's just not necessary. And I get it, but it's also like, why do you even need the garter anymore? You don't need the garter anymore. So it doesn't hold anything up. Again, if you want to do it, do it. But if you don't. You don't have to do it because someone asks if you're doing it, or if the photographer is like, hey, here's my typical shot list. We're going to do this and this and this and this and this. And you're like, but I don't want to do 3/4 of those things. Don't be afraid to say, that's not really what I want to do, but I really want these. I really want this kind of candid, or I really want a ton of photos of us on the dance floor. I don't care if they look like blurry, because I want to get the energy of what the event is going on as. Like, just have those conversations with all of your vendors about what you're hoping to get out of it, versus it's always done this way, so it should be done that way. Like, that to me is how you can start having these conversations about inclusivity, just in general. And for me, it's just about catering to what you need and want in your event, and just being an advocate for yourself. And then again, on behalf of your guests, like, that's the other piece I want people to, like, just because you might not identify as something, or you don't need those things, some of your guests might need those things. And so it's for you to be a champion of those folks, because they have no way of voicing their dietary restrictions, their gender, like, presentation, the way that they want to be identified or not identified.
Do you know what? That's a really good point, Jordan. Like, if perhaps couples can think about their wedding as their host, I mean, essentially, a lot of the times they are hosting a dinner party, rather than going to an a la carte restaurant where everyone gets to say, I prefer this, I want to sit at that table, I want to order this, I don't want entree, I do want appetizers, and I'm a vegetarian. You don't have that opportunity at a dinner party. And if you're the host of a dinner party, it's your responsibility, really, if you're going to have a good dinner party, to ask all of your guests those things. And you're an advocate for what they want and need to make everyone feel comfortable.
Yeah, like, they don't have a direct line to, like, the caterer and to be like, hey, listen, I'm allergic to shellfish, don't put shellfish in there. They're going to be like, hey, couple getting married / planner, I'm allergic to shellfish, make sure shellfish aren't on my plate. And then we are going to the caterer and being like, place setting 2 at this table, no shellfish. And you do that, but no one is like, hey, this person can't be sat at this table because this person's a bigot and this person isn't. You don't always think about those things to the same level. And so for me, it's just about, what do they need? I mean, again, you don't have to bend over backwards and try and accommodate every single little minutia thing, but basic table stakes are like making sure that everyone is represented and heard and feels comfortable, so that they're like, I'm going to come here, I'm going to feel comfortable, I'm going to have a blast. End goal of the event, in my opinion.
Because that's what they're all trying to do, right? That's what all these engaged couples are trying to do, is have this amazing celebration of their relationship and their family and their life. But you're right, you're taking everyone else along on the ride. That's so good. Any other ways that engaged couples can roll out inclusive language in their day of design?
I'm also just like getting rid of the name bride and groom. We've chatted a little bit about it, but just identify the couple as the couple. Like Jordan and Greg, like Cammie and Matt. Yeah, I'm just a big advocate for just names. It's the easiest way. You don't offend anyone.
Because a lot of people are worried about offending others, but it seriously is the easiest way to make sure people know that it's them that you're talking to.
So yeah, I'm just a big advocate to like strip it all back, talk about relationship. So parent, sibling, any of those kind of things.
So good, Jordan. So good. Really enjoy chatting with you. A good day. What have you got coming up?
I've got a couple conferences. I'll probably be a little bit around the US. I've got events that I'm super excited about that are coming up. Some of my couples, every year I get to work with so many different folks. And so for me, getting to work on their stationery is like super meaningful because everything I do is so custom. No two of my events are ever the same, even if they're the same color palette or theme or style. It's because the couple's different and my inspiration's different. And so every year I get to meet so many different new people. And so I've got some really cool, challenging projects where I'm like, I don't know how to do this. And I don't know how to do this, but I'm going to work with you to come up with something that's going to be super cool. And so I've got a few of those this year that I'm really excited to sink my teeth into. And then I also get to work with some of the vendor, like the wedding professional side of things too. And so I love getting to meet people there and helping them do these things and get to know how to improve their own businesses.
That's a big year, Jordan.
Yeah. I've got a line of candles I'm coming out with later this year as well, because I have nothing else to do, apparently. But I'm really excited because I've been doing gifting a little bit more. And so we've got some candles that we're going to be doing that are going to be direct to public.
Thank you so much for your time, Jordan. Thank you so much for helping us sort of think about different ways to challenge how our weddings can be more of our own, but also how we can make our guests feel even more comfortable and loved. So then we all have a better wedding.
Yeah.
It's wonderful. Thanks so much, Jordan.
Awesome. Thank you so much.
That about wraps it up for this episode of the Unbridely podcast. For the links and resources we mentioned, please head to the show notes. And if you love the show, please review and subscribe on the podcast platform you're on now so you don't miss out on a single episode. Thanks so much for listening. And remember, weddings are a team sport. Catch you soon.